Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Can everybody hear me? Yes, you can hear me okay?
Those in the room?
Well, yeah, but online. Everybody can hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We have a special presenter today, and the lecture on fasting our monkey mind, confluence between Zhuangzi, Taoist philosophy, and Chan Gongans. By Dr. Edmond Chang. Dr. Chang is a senior lecturer in the Making of Modern World program at UC San Diego, where he has taught for the past 20 years. Dr. Chang received his PhD in comparative literature from UC San Diego in 2002, and we are very fortunate that he is here with us. We encourage you to have questions, comments at the end. So without further ado, we have Dr. Chang here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ileana, for that introduction. And also thank you to Shifang Temple for inviting me to kick off this wonderful lecture series. I believe this is the first one of the season. So it's a great honor to, to fill that role. I also want to, thank all the guests who are here, a lot of close friends and former students. So thank you for taking setting aside the Friday evening to join us, and then all our guests online too. Some friends from far places too that are listening to this online. So yeah, for me it's a particular honor to do this at this temple, because this was a temple that my mother felt was like a second home to her. She passed away last year. But this temple was always very important to her in her life for the 30 or some years that she's lived in San Diego. But her affinity with Foguangsan, with the larger organization, goes even farther back to when she was just maybe 6 years old. So when Master Xing Yun first set up his first monastery in Taiwan, the very rural, remote area in Taiwan, it just happened to be very close to where my grandparents lived, along with my mother. And so since that time, they have always had a very close relationship with Foguangsan. There's a photo that we've seen of my mom and her two little brothers and Master Xing Yun, who was maybe in his 20s at the time. And the whole group of people that he took care of as a part of the monastery. So it's a special honor for me to be again affiliated with Shifang Temple and Foguangsan, because of that long-standing family connection, with this temple. And I just feel that if my mom were listening right now, she would be really happy that I'm doing this, giving this talk at this temple. So, all right. And so again, thank you everyone for being here. And just I'm sure there's a way for everyone to keep track of the upcoming events too. I believe it's a monthly series. Is that right, Basil? Yeah. So keep an eye out for what the lectures are, in the coming months. So my topic is on it's called Fasting of the Monkey Mind, but it's on the confluence of Zhuangzi's Taoist philosophy and the tradition that in the West we understand as Zen Buddhism. Now in China, it's called Can. And so today I will be mostly trying to use the Chinese term Can, all right, to refer to that. Now, I don't know how familiar everyone is with Taoism, so I need to begin by just clarifying the term Taoism, because there could be some confusion when it comes to the the use of the English term Taoism. Now, in Chinese, it's not as big of an issue because um, religious Taoism is referred to as Dao Jiao. So Chinese people will know that's what that is referring to. And then philosophical Taoism would be referred to as Dao Jia. But in English, we don't have that luxury of the distinction of the term. So I do need to make that distinction clear to begin with. So religious Taoism mostly, entails different yogic practices. In fact, down the street, there is a Taoist sanctuary. And so I don't know how much, Taoist philosophy they do, but I do know that it's a lot of Qigong and, a lot of different yogic practices, all about nurturing the vital Qi. In historically speaking, religious Taoism, those practitioners have always have also been quite fixated on this idea of finding elixirs for immortality. It ended up killing many of them, prematurely, but that was also part of that religious Taoist tradition. And then today, in today's terms, you'll see people use the term Taoism to refer to a lot of folk religions, in places like Taiwan and China, especially in rural areas. You might have a local shrine, you might have folk deities that are worshipped. All of that is under this broader umbrella of Taoism. But our concern here today is not with. I'm hearing myself in my computer. I don't know if there's a way I can. Maybe I can. Well, I have the. Is that? Do I have to mute myself? Oh no, it's good now. Yeah, online people can still hear. You guys can still. Okay, all right, that's better. It's funny hearing my own sound through the computer. So where was I? So our concern here is with philosophical Taoism. In Chinese, it's Dao Jia. And when it comes to philosophical Taoism, there are, mostly two figures that we talk about. One is Laozi and one is Zhuangzi. But, I'll mention another one, Yangzhu, just kind of as a way of explaining what the basic, concerns are for most Taoists, philosophical Taoists. So Yangzhu, maybe 4th century BCE, he provided what I would say the most basic expression of this philosophy by emphasizing this idea of fending for oneself. Like there's nothing more important for him than self-preservation. And what he had advocated was the best way to protect yourself to assure your security is to simply retreat into the mountains and become a hermit. Just separate yourself from society, all sources of danger, and that's maybe the best way. So not really complicated, right? Lao Tzu adds a little more of a cosmological dimension to this idea of self-preservation. And so he would say, yeah, you can retreat to the mountains all you want, but trouble will always find you. Why? Because the cosmos is always governed by dualities. In other words, think of the pendulum effect. Too much of a good thing is going to always lead to something bad, right? And vice versa. So there's a basic Taoist idea that the good and the bad always have a way of offsetting each other. So if you're trying to escape, good luck. Trouble will find you at one way or another. So for Lao Tzu, the overarching principle is what we call the principle of reversal. Similar to that pendulum effect that I talked about. The natural tendency for all things to incline towards their opposite. In other words, for example, whatever is strong will eventually become weak, right? Whatever is full will eventually drain to the point of empty. Whoever is potent, whatever is potent will at some point become more impotent. Whatever starts, high will, thanks to gravity, also, fall to a lower point. So this whole idea, Taoists, pay a lot of attention to nature, and these are the patterns that they often pick out from nature. So that's Lao Tzu, this idea of pendulum effect, this principle of reversal. Again, not too difficult, to understand. Zhuangzi, however, takes it to yet another level. So these are all, Taoists. They're just philosophical Taoists, but they have kind of different takes on what it means, what is required for self-preservation. So for Zhuangzi, he would say you can withdraw from the world, but that would not guarantee security. And you also cannot predict, assume that all change is predictable. The way that Lao-Tzu might assume that all change is predictable. So the best way to engage the world and to maintain your vitality and maintain your qi is to transcend dualities altogether. In other words, learn to embrace what he calls the great transformation of all things. Everything will change. And the more fixated you are on oppositions and dualities, the more you're going to have yourself your hands tied and be on and become unable to deal with immediate situations. So for him, it's about rising above distinctions. Being able to not necessarily separate what might appear to be good fortune, because who knows, it may actually lead to misfortune, right? So to transcend these all kinds of distinctions and to treat all change with an utterly flexible, spontaneous, and importantly, empty mind. It's about being fluid. All right. So Zhuangzi is more, he puts more emphasis on that. And our focus today is not on the other two. There's really not, Lao-Tzu I can talk about for a lot, but in terms of today's topic, Zhuangzi is really our focus in terms of how it intersects with Zen traditions and with especially the tradition of Gongans, that we'll talk about. Okay. All right. Everyone good so far? You can hear me and you can, everyone online good? Okay, so let's go to our next slide here. Oops. Let me see how I can advance this. Oh, there you go. Okay. Everyone online, you can see the second slide? No? Uh-oh. No, can they see? You guys, obviously, you can see the second slide.
Yes, we see it online. Yeah.
You can see it online now? All right, excellent. Okay. I've tried to, select some beautiful pictures for you to look at in case the talk is too boring. You have some visual appeal at least. Anyway, so little bit about Zhuangzi, his background. So this was an actual person who lived roughly from 369 to 286. I say roughly, but I think it's a pretty universally accepted, date for his lifetime. And what makes him different from Lao-Tzu is that Lao-Tzu was, by most scholarly accounts, a legendary figure. So we attribute the Book of the Way, the Tao Te Ching, to this legendary figure Lao-Tzu, but no one, no one can know for sure if there was such a figure. But the same is not true for Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi was a real person, and he was a contemporary of Confucius, this important Confucian scholar Mencius. Have you guys heard of Mencius? Yeah, Mengzi. Okay. There are lots of stories around Zhuangzi's life. One of them, is that at one point he was offered the post of becoming prime minister at a particular state, but in a very characteristic way, he refused by saying, "Why would a turtle want to be caged in the royal court when it can drag its tail in the mud all day long?" Yeah. I mean, what's better than, being able to drag your tail around, all day long? Yeah. I have lots of tortoises, so I know they're very happy just, being able to do that. It's possible also that he did end up accepting a minor post as a overseer of some royal lacquer woods, right? So lacquer, lacquer trees, they use the sap, right, to make the varnish. And I can't imagine a better job for a philosopher than to be an overseer of trees. You just sit there and observe and contemplate all your different ideas, and work on your philosophy. And indeed, a lot of his philosophy reflect the ruminations of a very avid observer of the natural world. His knowledge really doesn't come from books. It comes from just seeing things around him, especially things in the natural world. And one of the things that nature taught him to see was to see beyond all these oppositions that most of us are fixated on. The difference between fortune and misfortune, the distinction people, make between what's moral and what's immoral, right? Or, as a lot of Zhuangzi stories about the absurdity of defining this is useful, but this is useless. Oh, do you understand? Like who's to say what's useful to everyone? So we become fixated on that too. And even things like the difference between life and death. So lots of the stories that associate with Zhuangzi, for example, the dream of the butterfly that some of us, may be aware of. It's really a metaphor for asking the question, how do we know, that death is the end of things, and somehow life, this life that we see here is actually the not the dream, but the real thing. So all these things. And the fundamental point, behind a lot of the stories that he tells is emphasizing the relativity of value. So there's this well-known parable at Zhuangzi. I strongly recommend reading Zhuangzi if you're, into these very colorful, very interesting parables, especially based on nature. He has this parable about a group of monkeys. So these monkeys, they were told by the zookeeper, by the monkey keeper, that he was going to change his ways. So in the past, apparently, he would give them each of them 4 nuts in the morning and 3 at dusk. But he said, you know what? I'm going to change that. I'm going to give you now 3 in the morning and 4 at dusk. And this caused a riot among these monkeys. They were all, just this uproar, like, no way, we can't accept that at all. And it's an allegory for what? It's an allegory for how fixated we are on, particular things. So 3 times 4, 4 times 3, no, not times, plus. I can't do math. I'm sorry. So 3 plus 4, yeah, 4 plus, they all equal the same thing. The same thing, 7, and yet they become fixated. I slip into we because we're also sometimes quite like that, fixated on petty differences, not not being able to accept and recognize the transformation of all things, and instead becoming obsessed over these little differences. So all these stories that from Zhuangzi are really meant to help us reflect on our own tendencies. So in this case, it's monkeys, but it's kind of like our own monkey minds, right? Our minds that are restless and frantic and always, fixated on these petty differences. There's also another one, which I'll read to you, where he just uses the simple, difference between this versus that to convey this, the same point. So this is a good translation of Zhuangzi, by the way. If you just want, this is by Burton Watson, and it's a very, kind of accessible translation. Not scholarly, but not to the point where it becomes, really inaccessible or too esoteric. So Zhuangzi says, therefore, the sage does not proceed in such a way that illuminates all in the light of heaven. He too recognizes a this, but a this which is also that, a that which is also this. His that has both a right and a wrong in it. His this too has both a right and wrong in it. So in fact, does he still have a this and a that? Or does he in fact no longer have a this and a that? How many of you got that? Probably not. So if I'm standing here, oh, they can't see me. I would say this chair, right? Yeah, this chair. But let's say if I were standing at more, and I'm pointing this out to you, I would say that chair, no? Same chair, but we have these different modifiers for it. And so what he's really emphasizing here is that, just like these difference in pronouns, the way we determine something being useless or useful, moral or immoral, is all contingent on perspective. I simply walked away a little bit and that becomes that chair and no longer this chair. So it's a simple kind of trope to just explain how meaningless it can be and how absurd when we become fixated on how we define things. And this, in many ways, I think is an implicit critique of the Confucian emphasis. Not Confucius himself necessarily, but the Han Confucian emphasis on the rigid determination of what is moral, what is benevolent, what is virtuous, what is filial. And Zhuangzi is simply saying it's all relative, right? Depends, it's relative to our perspective. So the danger of making such a big distinction, make a big deal of these distinctions is that we forget everything changes. And so when we become fixated on our way of viewing something or judging something, we're totally ignoring how things change all the time. In fact, we may not even be aware that our perspective might have changed, but somehow we're still clinging on, to our judgment of things. So when our mind is too fixated on the difference between things and between people, we ignore the fundamental truth of transformation, the fundamental truth of in Buddhist terms, of impermanence. Right? So for Zhuangzi, then, the best way to embrace this great transformation of all things is to cultivate an empty mind. And the way you go about cultivating an empty mind is through this practice that he refers to as the fasting of the mind. So in so much of our, education, we're told to just load our brains, our mind with as much information, as much knowledge or ideas and concepts and even opinions as possible. This is saying, clear that out. All right. And I'll elaborate on that more. So Emily, let me know if I'm not scrolling fast enough. Are we on the same place? If you see me talking about something and it's not related to this, I'm behind. Okay. All right. So just give me a holler. All right. We good? Oh, wait. Didn't I talk about this already?
Well,
Yeah, that was a chair, but there was this Emily, I was behind. Okay. I can't trust you. All right, Ariel, you're in charge now. Oh no. Okay on my screen. Oh, can you show me? Where's the okay?
I can't, we're not seeing it.
Oh,
But yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's not
are
hard.
you guys able to see? Yeah. Wait, so I've already talked about the slide, right? I believe so. All right. There you go. Okay. I see I was behind. Didn't even know. All right. So this concept of the fasting of the mind actually occurs in one of the chapters in Zhuangzi. So I don't know if he's the first one to use this. He may be, but I don't want to make a claim that I can't fully substantiate. But this is the term Xing Zai, means fasting. Zai means fasting. Xing is heart or mind. All right. So Xing Zai is fasting of the mind. This concept occurs in the chapter called "In the World of Man." One of the chapters in Zhuangzi, 人间世. And in this chapter begins with an imagined conversation between Confucius and his favorite student, Yan Hui. So this is Zhuangzi imagining Confucius having a conversation with a student. Okay, and in this scenario, Kongzi notices that Yang Hui, his student, is getting ready, to leave and very excited about embarking on this journey. He says, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to the state of Wei," he says. "Why are you going to the state of Wei?" This is what his student says in response. So he's going to the state of Wei because this is Yang Hui speaking. "I have heard that the ruler of Wei is very young. He acts in an independent manner, thinks little of how he rules his state, and fails to see his faults. It is nothing to him to lead his people into peril, and his dead are reckoned by swampfuls like so much grass. His people have nowhere to turn." Sound familiar? Except for the age. Except for the age, right? Anyway, so he feels like it's his duty to go to the state and enlighten this tyrant, this young tyrant. He wants to teach him about benevolence. He wants to teach him what it means to be a righteous and responsible ruler. And he reasons with Confucius that, because he sees himself as an upright gentleman, his duty is not to hang around in a state that is already well ordered, right? Like I assume where they are right now is well ordered, but instead to always to go to a state that is in chaos. So he feels that is his responsibility as a upright gentleman, as a scholar. So he wonders why his teacher would even take issue with that. He says to Confucius, "Isn't that what you've been teaching us all along to do, right? To put our knowledge into use, and this situation definitely calls for that." So we wonder why, this is a pretty noble aspiration on Yang Hui's part. We wonder why Confucius would take issue with this. In fact, isn't this what he's been teaching his students all along? Confucius is concerned, and because he knows Yang Hui is setting out with his head crammed with his own notions of virtue, and also all the while wearing his armor of his moral reputation. Do you understand? His head is full with ideas of what should be done, and full of maybe he's not conscious of it, but he certainly is someone who has a reputation of being a very moral individual. So he's taking all of that with him. So in a sense, Yang Hui is too eager to go and pontificate on a slew of with a slew of preconceived ideas on how best to rule before he has even set foot in that state. Do you guys understand? So Confucius knows that he hasn't even been there, but he is going with the perfect confidence. I know what needs to be done. And that is that's real folly in his eyes. So even after Yang Hui insists, "But I can go with a humble mind. I can go with an open and flexible mind. You don't need to worry about that," Confucius is still not convinced. And this is what he says to Yang Hui. He says, "Goodness, how can you, even with that, how can you still dare to go? You have too many policies and plans, and you haven't seen what is needed. You will probably get off without incurring any blame, yes, but that will be as far as it goes. How do you think you can actually convert him? You are still making the mind your teacher." That last line, "You are still making the mind your teacher." That is a critical, important line here. So let's explore what is so dangerous about making one's mind one's teacher in this case. The mind, according to Zhuangzi, is a storehouse. It's a storehouse of all these preconceived notions that we have, of all these calcified prejudices and biases that we Yeah. That we have accrued, in this lifetime over many lifetimes. It is a storehouse of all these formalized mental circuitry that, very in a very unconscious way dictate how we think. And it is a storehouse of these deeply entrenched patterned reactions to things. So this is a good intersection to some of you may be familiar with the five skandhas, right, in Buddhism. One of the skandhas, the fourth one, is what often is translated as the mental formations, right, or psychic constructions. These things that in Buddhist terms can accrue over many lifetimes, and they become so encrusted in our mind that we're not, most of the time we're not even aware of them. And so what Confucius is warning Yan Hui is that he's going with this storehouse of all these things, crammed in his head. And only by clearing his storehouse, only by restoring the mind to the empty chamber that it should be, can, Zhuangzi says, can light actually enter? Can light, he uses the term heavenly light, can heavenly light actually enter? Meaning in our, in terms that we can maybe understand more, we need space in the mind in order to actually think. Sometimes we use the phrase, I need space to think. Yeah. And maybe we're just thinking of like the physical space, but the more important space is actually in here. I need space to think is there may be a lot of things, in your mind that you first need to address before you can actually think clearly about things, to think mindfully about situations or problems that are actually immediately in front of you. In a very unmediated way, being able to engage the things in front of us. So in other words, for Zhuangzi, a truly potent, a truly lucid mind is always an empty mind, not a mind that is actually crammed with preconceived notions, but an empty mind. Empty, of prejudice, of presumption, and especially of tunnel vision. You can also think of it in this way, a mind that is capable of thinking outside the box. We also say that too, yeah? Yeah, but what if you're actually able to think without the box, not just outside the box, but without the box altogether? I think this is the highest level, that Zhuangzi is talking about. And all of this is very central to what he means by fasting of the mind. Fasting of the mind is not necessarily just, a mind that is completely empty all the time, but it's more about what do you need to get rid of in order for you to actually mindfully engage with what is in front of you. That is what is meant by fasting of the mind. So I don't know about you, but I find this to be a very empowering concept because for me, the great obstacle has always been my preconceived notions of things and my preconceived prejudice and bias and my own formulaic way of dealing with problems. That often is the most important impediment to mindfully dealing with situations. And so I think this is what Zhuangzi is talking about. But the thing with Zhuangzi is that I don't think, he's quite good with the diagnosis, but not as good with the prescription. Because in all of Zhuangzi, you don't really see much guidance or this is the practice. It's using a lot of humor, a lot of witty stories to expose problems that we deal with, but not necessarily this is what you need to do to establish a practice. And so in terms of that, I think it's best to turn to Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism to see what kind of meditation practices and especially the use of koans, how they may provide us with some more practical approaches to fasting the mind. Okay, so that's not just necessarily a, this abstract concept, but it's something maybe you can tangibly, work on. Okay, all right. All right, so let's go to our next slide. I believe I'm in the right place here. Okay, all right. So now a little bit, just a little bit of background, because I'm sure a lot of people here already know much of this. So Zen, as I said, is the term that most of us are familiar with when we're referring to this particular tradition or sect of Buddhism. But it's useful for all of us to know that Zen is the Japanese derivative of the Chinese term Tan. All right. How many of you have heard of Tan before? Some of you? Yeah, some of you. All right, so it's good I mentioned that. So Zen is a Japanese derivative of the Chinese character Tan. And then the Chinese term Tan is itself derived from the Sanskrit term dhyana. Dhyana means meditation. So this tradition from the start was something very much focused on meditation as opposed to focusing on particular sutras. So according to the Tan tradition, you guys don't mind if I just use Tan because we're talking about Chinese context. So now that this, I'm talking about Zen at the same time. All right, but so it's Tan. According to the Tan tradition, the first transmission in this tradition was attributed to the Buddha himself. And this is referred to as the flower sermon. So on this occasion, I think it's been promoted as a very important Dharma talk that the Buddha was going to give in Deer Park. And you can imagine an audience of maybe thousands, everyone eagerly awaiting this important Dharma talk. And in a very uncharacteristic way, the Buddha showed up late. So everyone was like on the edge of the seat, saying, what's going on? What's going on? So he finally shows up, not too late. He shows up, he assumes the lotus position, right? And all the while, not saying a single word. And he pulls out from his pocket a flower and he lifts it, in front of him. And everyone is baffled. The entire audience is baffled. Like, what's this about? All except for one disciple called Mahakashyapa. Mahakashyapa exchanged glances with the Buddha and smiles. Smiles. It's a smile of what? Of recognition, of acknowledgement. He gets it. Do you understand? So the Buddha, again, without saying anything, puts the flower down and simply walks away. You guys heard of the flower sermon before? Yeah, this is the very quintessentially Tan. In terms of the Tan tradition in China, what a really important figure has to be the Bodhidharma. You see him here, right? It's pretty fearsome look, yeah, yeah. You know why? Because he slit his own eyelids so that he would maintain this alertness in meditation. That's why he looks that way. Anyway, so the Bodhidharma came to China, they say around maybe the 6th century CE. And from the start, this tradition, Tan, was very appealing especially to the scholarly elite, because they saw a lot of, familiar aspects of this tradition, that was familiar to existing Chinese philosophical traditions. We already talked about Taoism, the emphasis on spontaneity, on intuitive understanding. So you have that in Taoism, and you also have that in Tan Buddhism. So they were really drawn to this, but also the compatibility between Tan and Confucian practices. In Confucian tradition, there's a lot of emphasis given to the relationship between a teacher and a student. And you see that also, the guidance of a master for a Tan student, also very important. So that also is something that explains the appeal of Tan especially to the Chinese literati. But let's not forget that in the Tan tradition, teachers and scriptures, they are compared to ladders. Once you have achieved, what you need, you can discard the ladder. You probably don't have that same thing in Confucianism, but in Chan, the emphasis first and foremost is on self-enlightenment. Self-enlightenment as opposed to just following, always the tutelage, even of a great master. It's really about, gaining that level of independence, self-enlightenment that you can move on. You can, let go, not be attached even to your master. So Bodhidharma offers a very useful description of Chan practice. And so I have the quote up there. I'll read it. A special transmission outside the scriptures. So Chan, unlike some maybe other Buddhist traditions, doesn't put much emphasis on certain sutras. So outside of the scriptures, no reliance on words and letters. That's why the flower sermon is very, as I said, quintessentially, Chan. And then the last two phrases here, directly pointing to the very mind. So this is what if you ask him to sum up what Chan entails, this is it. Directly pointing to the very mind, seeing into one's own nature. So let's explore how these last two claims, how they're related and what they mean, in the context of our talk. So simply put, it's about tapping into what's called the Buddha nature, our own Buddha nature through mindful meditation. So the pointing to the mind, you can say, is the mindful meditation. And then the seeing into our nature. What is our own nature? It's the Buddha nature. Okay. As one scholar put it, our Buddha nature is essentially our Buddha mind. And what does it mean to have a Buddha mind? It means to be able to transcend differences, transcend distinction of subject and object, and duality of any kind. So remember, this is very similar to what Zhuangzi had talked about, being able to transcend oppositions, transcend, dualities. In the Buddhist context, this is referred to as the Buddha mind. We're talking about the fasting of the mind, but in the Buddhist context, this is more like the Buddha mind. So very similar to Zhuangzi, but also very similar to the Taoist notion of returning to the state of the uncarved block. So one of the key ideals in Taoist philosophy is this notion, the ideal of the uncarved block, to be able to recover the original self, right? The original, being without all these entrapments. And then some of you may have heard of the Taoist notion of Wu Wei. Wu Wei means no action, right? So let me explain how this relates too, because in the Taoist context, no action does not mean not doing anything. It doesn't mean, not just you sit there like a block of wood or like a immobile stone, but it means not committing to action that is predetermined, that is formulaic, that is confined by habits and assumptions. That's what Wu Wei means. Spontaneous, fluid, flexible, and dealing with situations as the situation calls for, not going in with preconceived ideas. So this is, of course, exactly what Zhuangzi's Confucius was trying to remind Yan Hui of, because he was going to the state of Wei, again, as I said, with his head full of preconceived notions. So in this sense, again, this confluence, this intersection between Zhuangzi's fasting of the mind and the Buddhist emphasis, the Chan emphasis on pointing to the mind, and also of finding our own Buddha mind, Buddha nature. All right? Pointing to the mind, why does Bodhidharma emphasize directly pointing to the very mind? Because he's describing what I believe is the point, what is the main point of meditation? The main point of meditation is not to achieve some state of the absence of thought. I mean, for a lot of beginner meditators, they think that's what I'm trying to do, right? Clear my head of all, just go blank. No, think of it this way. It's more about how about putting a mirror to your mind? Putting a mirror to your mind so you're observing what in the world is going on in this head of mine, in this box of mine. What are the monkey thoughts? What are the hamster wheel storylines? We all have storylines. What are those monkey thought storylines? How are they controlling me? So in many ways, Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, this is what they emphasize. Not about absence of thought, not about ignoring our feelings or sensations, but actually to truly, in a very literal sense, be more mindful of our mind, be more mindful of what's going on in our head. And the goal is maybe before they become so deeply embedded, so deeply encrusted in our mind, where we don't even know. We start to think it's just part of my second nature. You guys understand? You follow? It's just so deeply entrenched that we just feel that is who I am, as opposed to what our Buddha nature or Buddha mind, should be. So, the delusions become so real that that it becomes more, it seems to be more of the reality than the Buddha nature or Buddha mind that Chan tradition talks about. So only when we're able to get past the prison of our own delusions can we truly see all phenomena in their undistorted, unmediated, and original face. So I bet a lot of you are familiar with haiku poems. In a haiku poem, what is a haiku poem trying to accomplish? Get us to a state where we can see a leaf, a flower, a dewdrop, or a mountain for what it is, as opposed to imposing all these, ideas we have on those things. It's about being able to engage the world, engage things and people in that state of immediacy without any, interference. Easier said than done, right? To be able to see mountains as mountains. Easier said than done. So let's turn now to what are some of the more, concrete ways in 10 that we talked about already. So let me move forward to this slide. Am I in the right slide? I think so. Yes. All right. So how to free the mind of these old habits that we've talked about, these fixed notions, calcified prejudices that I mentioned, and especially these very restrictive, habitual, and formulaic thought processes that really govern how we think without us even realizing it, without us being even aware of it. So how do we free our mind from its own comfort zone? Because sometimes when we have all these things in our head, it creates its own comfort zone and prevents us from actually dealing with situations as they demand. So in the Tan tradition, there's a lot of emphasis on changing our perspective. And what better way to change our perspective on things than to just travel? If you sit in your study all day long, good luck. I don't think too much can change. But if you actually move around and travel and expose yourself to new places, new people, that is possible. Okay. And especially this idea of being in nature, maybe hiking in the mountains and just allowing yourself to be startled, to be surprised and shocked by the things you see. There's a wonderful Robert Haas poem that I've always liked. It's called Squaw Peak, and there's a line where he says, "The mountain, I think, startled my small grief." Love that line. Did I put it up here? Yes. I like it so much, I put it up there. And I even emphasized, I love that the choice. John, I mean, you can relate to this. The choice of one word that can make all the difference in the line. And the startled, I think, is just wonderful. I mean, Ariel, imagine hiking the mountains and then seeing something, and then you're startled by what you see. It really jolts you. And that effect is good to break out of your routine, yeah, break out of your mind's own comfort zone. And then there is also the use of manual labor. There is a famous story of the sixth patriarch, Huinan. Huinan, you see him, in the previous slide. He becomes a sixth patriarch, but before he is given any lesson, he was asked by the master, by the abbot of the monastery, to sweep the floor. He swept the floor for 8 months before anyone even spoke a word to him. All right. How many of you have watched the 80s movie Karate Kid? Yeah. Wax on, the iconic line, wax on, wax off. So Daniel-san goes to, you guys know this movie? Yeah. He goes to Mr. What's his name? Miyagi, and says, he wants to learn karate. But before Mr. Miyagi teaches him anything, he says, I have this car that needs to be waxed, and he needs to be waxed really good, So he has him do this, God knows for how long. And and um, and Daniel-san at first is very, very disgruntled. This is not why I came to you. But what was happening? What was happening? He was getting him to clear his head. Because this young kid came with all the rage, right? Is that right? He had been bullied or something, yeah. Well, the rage and all the frustration, he had to clear his head before he can learn anything. So, fasting of the mind, I think, in by waxing the car. And then the more enigmatic and you could say, like less accessible way of fasting the mind in the Chan tradition is through the use of what's known as Gong'an in Chinese. In Japanese, it's Koans, Zen Koans, and or Chang Gong'an. Gong'an in Chinese literally means public case. This is not some legal case. This is a record, I should say, of an exchange between a master and a disciple. All right. So it's just given this term public case. They tend to be very paradoxical. They tend to be even nonsensical. So I just want to warn you of this. Nonsensical. And the point, just like, being startled by something you see when you're hiking in the mountains, the point is to jolt the mind, to exhaust the mind towards both self-exposure as well as self-effacement. So, oh my goodness, all the things I've assumed, they don't apply anymore. And you could be in that very uncomfortable situation for a while, but that discomfort may be very useful. Do you understand? Like we become so accustomed to our comfort zone, we can't see outside of it. So discomfort, that jolting, that being startled, being shocked, being, kind of surprised in these ways, it's actually all very useful. I think of it as shock therapy for the mind. Shock therapy for, Koan, shock therapy for the mind. It's like, if we think of the way we think as some kind of mental circuitry, maybe the best way to interrupt that is to short circuit that circuitry. Do you understand? Just, disturb it. And so that you begin to maybe be able to look outside, of it. And by doing that, maybe we're able to be jolted out of our usual assumptions and patterns of deduction. I'm less concerned about maybe thoughts that we cling on to because those, maybe we can be aware of them a little, I wouldn't say easy, but maybe a little more likely we can be aware of some of those thoughts. But I'm much more concerned about the patterns of how we think. Those things, they become so intrinsic to our being that, we can't really think outside of that. Do you understand? It's like you're trying to make sense of it, but the way you make sense of it is through all the vocabulary that you're used to. How's that going to get you anywhere? So these are ways of trying to get past all of that, past the superficial difference of going back to the monkeys of 3 in the morning and four at dusk. How do we get past that? So we end with so this is the lecture part, and then we end with I don't know, it's not a game, but but I'll share some koans with you. Okay, can you guys all see? You can all see, yeah, and online. So yeah, that is yeah. I thought that was amusing. So these exchanges are almost always between a master and I should hurry, a master and a disciple. Okay, so in this case, the master says, "Your disciple is sick." The monk says, "I'm sorry." The monk says, "Your disciple is sick all over. Please cure me." "I shall not cure you. Why won't you cure me?" "So that you neither live nor die." Let me just make something clear. Do not ask me to explain any of these. I said they're nonsensical, paradoxical. Okay. All right. Let's go to another one. A monk asked, "How can silence be expressed?" The master said, "I will not express it here." "Where will you express it then?" "Last night at midnight, I lost 3 pennies by my bed." Go figure. All right. One more. "What are you doing?" This time the master, begins the question. "Sweeping the floor." "In front of the Buddha or behind it?" "Both at the same time." And the master says, "Give your sandals to Cao San." So he's impressed. This one I can understand. He's impressed. "I need your sandals." So in this case, the disciple actually, had that 10 intuition. Okay. And so I'm going to conclude by sharing with you a koan that you can fast your mind on. Okay. So this is my students, I think, remember this. This is known as the one finger koan. Yeah. So in this case, again, you have a master and a disciple. The disciple is really frustrated. He's been studying with his master for years, and he still can't get it. So one day he comes up to the master and just says, "Master, can you just please tell me what is the true essence of Buddha nature? I just need to know. I've had enough, trying to figure it out." Master kind of, sighs and looks at them and says, "Okay, if you insist, this is not the way it should work, but if you're so insistent, okay, I'll indulge you." So the master does this. And then the disciple goes, "Ah, I get it now. Whatever he made of this, I don't know." All right. Does it end there? No. So a week later, the master sees the same disciple. And now the master asks him the question, says, "Okay, you tell me, what is the true essence of Buddha nature?" And, without any hesitation, he's all pleased with himself. He's got it. And in the flash, before anyone could tell, master pulls out a machete, slices off the finger. Now there's just a bloody stump. There's just a bloody stump of that, right, where the finger used to be. This time, the disciple looks at that bloody stump and goes, "Ah." Could you tell the difference between the two ahs? Now well, according to this koan, he really gets it now. So a koan for you to fast your mind on. All right. Thank you so much for your attention. All right. Thank you. All right. So do we have time for Q&A? I know I did not manage the time very well. Just like in lecture, right, guys? I always go over time. Any questions here? Yeah.
Brady went straight to. The second might be because he lost too much blood.
Yeah, he definitely, I mean, the blood, kind of.
Paradoxical.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense at least to me. So how do you know if it's actually Chang or Zhang or processing or someone's just not there? Because you're dealing with people all day. Sounds like you're a professor, you teach and you deal with all sorts of people all day.
Mm-hmm.
And then if someone's not making sense, are you like, he's a really good Chan person, or man, this person's nuts. I mean, it's somewhere in between. So
I need to talk over there.
sorry, I'm supposed to say this in public forum. Go on.
Gongans.
Hello, thank you. I'm just asking, what's the difference between something that's like a moment, like a eureka moment when you deal with something that's paradoxical
Mm-hmm.
versus just playing whatever nuts?
Plain nuts.
Because,
So I
there's a
don't
lot
mean
of that
to.
too.
So in the Tan tradition, you have I don't know. Have you guys heard of the Tang poet Cold Mountain in China? Yeah. So many in his time would just have said like he's plain nuts. But our determination of what is plain nuts or who is plain nuts, we sometimes, when you encounter that, it is useful to ask yourself, um, what is informing myself of that judgment? So I'm not saying like, anything goes, but I think, those kind of responses can help us interrogate our own starting point. And I think that's what Tan is about. It's not just say, hey, you got to say something nonsensical and witty, and that makes it Zen. But it has to do with the context and the effect of that, making you maybe interrogate what your preconceived assumptions and starting point might be. And Tan would have enough latitude to allow for that, as opposed to very rigid determination of this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. I don't think there's in the Tan tradition they draw a line on, okay, this is a Tan saying and this is not. Okay, it's really, and then I think it also may depend on the receiver. Not everyone needs to hear this. No, not everyone needs to have their finger cut off. But the master felt like this guy did.
The master felt that way. The perceptions.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with the master in this case. I'm not, advocate of violence, and this is certainly not about, go around, carry a machete and just chop off fingers. But it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, and this is my interpretation. Even this became an attachment to a certain kind of fixed idea. Whatever the disciple associated what this means, he became fixated on that. This is it, and that can be dangerous. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, everyone.
Are there questions in the? No?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Because of the time, we will not be able to have more questions. But thank you, Marissa, for asking the questions, and we apologize if anybody out in Zoom had any more questions or here. But especially want to thank, or we want to thank Dr. Edmond Chang for being here and for the wonderful talk about fasting our monkey mind. We all have homework to
Thank
do.
you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
And I apologize for going over time. Yeah. Maybe if you have questions, you can send them to Venerable and I can respond to them.
You have an announcement.
One more announcement is for next Monday, next month, we have our second TBIF, which will be April 24th at 6:30, and everybody's welcome to join in. The topic will be mycelium network, ecological collaboration for systems restructuring by our presenter, Sebastián Frias. So please stay tuned for next month. We hope to see everyone back.